Hi, my name is Ilija, and I come from Novi Sad. I'm an original author of Active Collab project and co-founder at A51, a company that took over the development and support of the product. And today I will be talking for the first time. This is the first time that narrative has ever been mentioned in public. This is an internal tool that we've been working on for the past 6 months in our spare time to help us with API testing. So yeah, a bit of brief history. In early 2008, we released first version of the commercial Active Collab. As everyone who ever launched a product knows, version 1.0 is never what you want to launch. It's always version 1.1 because you finally have time to add things that you actually wanted to ship with 1.0. Then a year later, we released 2.1 with new features, then more features in 3 years. It took us 3 years to develop this thing. And then we evolved it in version 4, added more features, and now we are working on version 5 of Active Collab for the past year. It will be a year and a half in making when we finally release it. Yeah, more clarity, better user experience. It's simple, it's lighter, it's faster. What this history is actually is brief history of me writing API documentation. In early 2008, I wrote my first API documentation for the first version of the software. Then I maintained it in the second version of the software because it was evolution of the platform. So added API commands, documented, fixed errors in the documentation and everything. Then version 3 brought a whole new set of API commands and a set of tools and different responses and different way of authentication. And this is me again writing API documentation for 2 weeks, the most boring 2 weeks of my life. This is the worst job ever. But if you are releasing a product with the public API that is to be consumed by a third party, you definitely need an API documentation. Then again, version 4, me maintaining the documentation, again adding new commands as features are added, as features are altered, enhanced, fixing errors. There are still errors in current API documentation. People report them, and then I go open markdown file, fix it up, run the build script, upload the documentation, and it just worst job ever. And then in early 2015, we will release Active Collab version 5. And will I write my third API documentation? Because this is, again, different, better way to authenticate, new commands, simpler responses, faster. And the response is no way that I will ever do that again. So what I wanted actually is to find a tool that will help me test and write API documentation the way I used when I was writing my first two API documentation projects while I was working on them. So I set on a quest to find that tool. First tool that I was looking for was Conception. It's the closest thing that I found. But the tests are written in PHP, and it's hard to actually use these tests to produce readable documentation. It's great when you want to share it with stakeholders that are non-technical. You can get it in a list of things, assertions that passed or failed. But if you actually want to write a documentation the way documentation should be written, you cannot do that with Conception, at least not for now. Then I looked at JMeter. It was good for making requests, quite a powerful tool, decades in making, feels like it's been decades since it was made. And it's just, if you want to do anything with JSON in JMeter, it's just a horror story. You need to buy a third-party plugin that you pay through some shady store, and it's just don't. Then I found Postman. It's great, actually clicky, nice. I think it's bootstrap-powered interface where you make collections of the requests. There was a great promise that you can run collections of requests and then see in sequence how each affects another. But eventually, so I bought Jetpack, tried that, tried to share it. It's just not versionable. It was not something that I was looking for. But this should be simple, actually. This should be like, I want to test a simple sequence of requests and see how each affects another to create a story, a bunch of stories. Our projects are a bunch of stories that show how people should use, not necessarily should use, can use the software through the API. So I went to write our own system for testing and documenting API. And here are the simple principles. Write tests as you would explain your API to someone. So test goes like this. For the purpose of this test, and you write this as words, for the purpose of this test, we will create a project. Bam, request, then creates a project. And then we will create, invite a user. Huh? And then we will add that user to that project, another request. Finally, let's check that user has been added to the project. Request that confirms that. So technically, you write documentation as you would speak it, as you would document it. Second, don't repeat yourselves. Use these tests to generate the documentation. Because if your API is private just for your mobile developer, then it's okay not to have documentation. But if API is to be consumed by the public, by third parties, then definitely you need the documentation. So use tests to generate the docs. And finally, no IDE, please. No JMeter, no Postman, no buttons to click. Simple markdown files with a bit of JSON and a command line tool that you can run and see how your stories or tests are faring again, are working after the changes that you have made. And this is the simple request file. I hope you can see it. This is just a markdown file printed in terminal. So we start post and then JSON that defines how this particular request will be made. And then these are all post methods because that's what I could fit on the screen. There is support for get, delete, and put methods. So you define path, what will be executed. This particular method, first one, creates a persona. So you don't need to specify users up front, users of the API. For example, when you are checking whether notifications in your system are working in the API, you will create an event with the one user, and then you will execute using the API, and then you will execute check notification as another user to see whether first event emitted notification and whether that notification has been sent to the other user. So we need to be able to work with different users during the same story. And a narrative can create a user and authenticate it and reuse the token for other requests. Second one is also post. We will create a project, add member, and then validate whether we got HTTP code 200. We use JSON path to validate whether, to assert that response has values that we expect to have. Simple. As I said, this is internal tool, and that's why I said it is pragmatic. Nothing in this tool has ever been added because it looks nice. It's always added because we needed it. So, array of checks is basic, is not, has not, is empty array, stuff like that. And then we also add fetch. Fetch will use JSON path expressions to collect values from the responses and make them available to the next request. So in this particular case, post will be done as the default user, and we will collect when it was created, by whom it was created. We will sleep for 1 second, create a task as different user, as member, so persona from the first request, and compare whether created on time step is correct, well, is different than the first one, and whether user that created this task is actually different persona, different user. Running a test, setup teardown, that is what I was lacking with Postman. I needed a way to execute command line commands and restart Vagrant machine and put it into fresh state, fresh installation. It's slow because it reinstalls the whole application. We definitely need to get that faster. And then we can authenticate users on the fly, so we can use write stories and see how different users see the responses. And we have basic execution stats that show that our setup and teardown are super slow, but requests actually are done fast. And then eventually this is documentation. So there is a bit of text. In order to create a user, we'll send the post command to command resource, and then this is the actual request that we will execute. In last checks, if we have correct output, another request. Awesome. To learn more about user management, click story name. So this is actually writing documentation with tests embedded in it. This is pure Markdown plus a couple of commands that this command tag will link. You feed the system with all your routes that you want to test, and then a system, as it executes requests, it will match the routes and keep statistics, so you know which routes are frequently used, so you can optimize them, for example. And also creates like index in the book, end of the book. You know that you want to learn something about users resource, and you want to know which stories, which scenarios cover it. So instead of going through each story and looking up for the request, you go to the index and find users, see in how many times it has been executed, in which stories it was mentioned, how fast was it, and which methods were used. And story tag is used to link between stories, so you can actually provide a flow. When user reads the documents, he can click through and go to the next story. And yeah, Markdown, index of commands, yeah, that's all done. This is how it looks like when it's built, actually. So this is the documentation that you get when you build, when you not just test, but actually run the build process. This is an example story. You see the text above, tags are converted to mark like method label, command link, and then you see here command, which query parameters were used, which response code we got, content type, response. This page is currently work in progress. It will also contain examples. When you publish your documentation, sometimes it is great to offer examples how to make a request using curl or your SDK or built-in libraries. And yes, as I said, this is an internal tool. It has not yet been, it's not yet useful to the public, but this is the first time I am talking about it to see whether there is interest in such tool. So if you are writing APIs that need to be tested because you have front-end developers that depend on you, mobile developers, we have. So this is the story. What happened when why this tool was important to us is previous version mixes. It's the same app where is front-end and back-end, and everything is within a single app. Now with version 5, we are splitting the system. So there is back-end that you communicate solely through the API. And then we have multiple front-ends. We have Angular-powered web front-end. We have 2 mobile applications for Android and for iOS. We have browser extensions. We have desktop clients. We have API SDK that we ship. So, and when someone comes and tell me, okay, is this working, or you just broke the API, you just, I do the backend development, you just broke the API, this is not working, I'm receiving some crazy crashes. And when you separate, when you make a backend isolated and a black box, it needs to be tested, and in our case, since it is consumed by the public, also documented at the same time. I don't know whether you have such a need, and I'm definitely eager to see if you do. So we will cross this over. Next up, if there is interest for this type of tool. We need to plug general purpose connectors, so it can connect to multiple services, not just through our SDK. Request example generators, this is definitely something that we will build, because as I said in documentation, it is great when you not just show what requests should be made. Anyone who has supported developers asking questions knows that developer, they want to know how to do things. They would, the best thing that you can provide to them is a code snippet in how to make a request, how to authenticate in Python. Here is a snippet. Or how can I execute this request in curl? Here's a snippet. So these plugins should generate these examples. JUnit compatible test results, so this can be, narrative can be executed using continuous integration tools. This is definitely on the roadmap because we need it for our Jenkins. Output plugins, so you can add comments or Google Analytics to your documentation, and eventually speeding up execution by using multiple virtual machines or Dockers or whatnot. So, yeah, as I said, this is an internal tool. It saved me a lot of time. It saved us a lot of stress, especially our guys working on multiple front ends. And if you have any interest in seeing this tool being developed further to be a general purpose tool for testing and documenting API, ping me on Twitter or send me an email and we can discuss your API, how you document it, how you test it, and it's available on GitHub. Look up the source. It's super simple, trivial, does not use any tokenizers. Really simple thing that works and can save a lot of time if you have the needs like we do. So, yep, that's it.